Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charlie, and it is quite early in the AM, mainly because I've been watching the E3 presentation, specifically Ubisoft's presentation, with the hopes that we would get a better glimpse at The Division 2. And I am super excited with what I've seen. The game is set 7 months after the deadly virus was released in New York City in The Division 1. And this time it is set in Washington, D.C. There were rumors already about it being in Washington, D.C., so that wasn't a huge surprise. But it looks very nice because of the presentation itself. For those of you who have played The Division 1, the problem with the game and the presentation itself was that it seemed very copy and paste. Most of the streets you would go through, they all seemed like just copies of previous streets, so it was sometimes very confusing, and it didn't give you that variety experience that you were looking for. Yes, there were some specific locations which do exist in New York, and they were pretty cool, but generally speaking, all of the streets, they looked too similar. So the good news is that in The Division 2, in this case, the environments seem to be more diverse. There's a bit of jungle, some very nice ruins, some very big open areas. So that looks very exciting. And I'm hoping the game will be much more alive, since in The Division 1, everything was very sparse and it just seemed pretty dead all around. There was really nothing exciting happening within the streets unless you ran into enemies, and it was always the same enemies most of the time anyway. So I'm really hoping that it's just more alive this time, and from what I've seen in the E3 demo, it seems to be that way. Also, the map this time, it's curious because when I saw the original trailer at the Xbox E3 conference presentation, the map itself, we got a relatively brief glimpse of the map, but it actually seems smaller than in The Division 1. But I'm actually happy to say that it's 20% bigger. And it's also a 1-to-1 scale with the actual real-life Washington, D.C. So that's pretty cool. I was originally a pretty big fan of The Division 1. I put in around 400 hours into that game. What I loved about The Division 1 is that they got quite a few things right in terms of the ambience. The graphics were fantastic, even though they were a downgrade, but still they were pretty incredible. There's no doubting that. The music was fantastic. The overall feel of the gameplay, they really nailed that. Just the way you aimed, the way you moved, the way you took cover, the way you would shoot, all of these things, it felt right. And that's very important to a game, the actual gameplay itself. So, you combine the gameplay with the graphics, the setting, just the overall feel of the location. It's quite engrossing. It really takes you in. But it did have its problems, especially at launch. It improved a lot over time, but at launch there just wasn't really much to do in the end game. Once you reached level 30, you had the Dark Zone, which was PvP. Most of it. I mean, yeah, there were a lot of NPCs, a lot of little bosses scattered around the map, which you could kill for loot. But you were competing against other players, or they might attack you, or you might group up with them to kill bosses or to kill other players. It was a bit messy, I have to say. Other than that, there was really no other content in Endgame at the beginning. Eventually, they released incursions, which are like the dungeons basically for 4 players. That was pretty cool. But I was really hoping for more. Another negative aspect that The Division 1 had was that there just weren't that many diverse enemies. You had a few enemy factions in the game, but they were generally pretty similar, and I don't know, it was pretty boring in that respect. I was really hoping for more interesting bosses, and yes, eventually, like I said before, they did release incursions, and there were some pretty cool bosses in that. But generally speaking, outside that, it was just pretty much the same thing, just copy and pasted everywhere. So I'm really hoping that in The Division 2 there are a lot more enemy factions, and enemies that you can really tell apart. And in the Division 1, once you played the game enough, you could tell them apart, of course. But, you know, they're still human beings with just different suits on most of the time. And from the E3 demo, I could see that, you know, one of the factions had this boss guy with this huge chunky armor on him. That was pretty cool. So I'm hoping to see more of that and more variations of that. PvP has also been confirmed for the Division 2, and the Dark Zone has been confirmed to be available at launch. So that's also pretty cool, because PvP was pretty big or still is pretty big in the Division 1, so a lot of players will be happy about that. I'm not really a PvPer per se. I prefer the more PvE content in it. So, but I'm glad that the option is there. Also, when they released incursions in the Division 1, even though I was pretty excited about that and they were pretty fun, I was always thinking to myself, please, you know, it would be amazing if you could release raids, you know, with more sophisticated bosses and, you know, these bigger dungeons for more players, where you have, you know, kind of like similar to MMOs, you know, like World of Warcraft and Star Wars: The Old Republic, where you would go in, you had to pull trash, kill trash, etc. You get to a boss room. That boss would have some interesting mechanics you had to get through to kill him. Then you would pass that boss and, you know, get to a harder boss. And it was like this really cool, like, big sprawling complex, you know, that was aesthetically very beautiful and menacing, and it was really cool to go through. So I'm really hoping that the Division 2 will give us some really cool raids. And that has been actually confirmed. There will be raids, and there will be 8-man raids. So I am very, very psyched about that. Level 30 still seems to be the max level in the game, which is kind of to be expected, really. You're not continuing the leveling from the Division 1, not like an MMO. This is a brand new game, which builds on top of the first game, but you start fresh. Level 1 character, and you progress to level 30, just like in the first game. What concerned me a bit when I saw the trailer and the demo at E3 yesterday, basically it just seemed a bit too familiar, you know. It just seemed like the exact same game as before, just in a different setting. So that worried me a little bit, but then they started talking about specializations, which is kind of interesting. Basically, once you reach level 30, which basically once you get to endgame, it seems you have to choose a specialization. And right now there are 3 specializations confirmed. One is a survivalist, basically, and you have a precision crossbow assigned to you as a survivalist. There's the demolitionist, which obviously deals with explosives, and the weapon of choice for this is the grenade launcher. This is what you get for that specialization. And finally the sharpshooter, well, obviously, which is the sniper guy, and you get a sniper rifle. Now, it was a bit confusing in the presentation, the way they explained it. They said that once you get to level 30, you have to choose a specialization and you have to stick to it, but apparently after that you can still pursue the other 2 specializations. Since this is done through a skill tree, each specialization has a skill tree. So I guess you progress through that skill tree, and I don't know if you have to maximize that skill tree in order to progress another specialization, or if you can just start with one specialization and then maybe if you're halfway through you can start pursuing a different specialization. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, or they didn't explain it exceptionally, so to speak. But from what I understood, yes, eventually you'll be able to complete all specializations, so you'll be this big badass and you'll be able to use all the weapons in the game with all the armor sets, and which I assume there will be armor sets, some of them specific to a specialization. So it's interesting that they've decided to mix it up a bit, but we'll see how it plays out. What I did notice is that there is no healing class specialization, which I was kind of expecting, since in the Division 1 you could basically, they had armor sets which were more specific to healing, and also talents that will provide better healing abilities, all these things. So I was kind of surprised that there wasn't a specialization specifically for healing, but I guess this could be a way of addressing the issues with PvP in the Division 1, where, I mean, you could spend, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes just fighting the same person over and over because you could just heal yourself constantly, and it was a nightmare basically. It was really unbalanced. So perhaps what they've decided to do is remove those healing abilities and just, so you have to stick with just basic health packs. So they might be nerfing the whole healing dynamic of the game in order to perhaps resolve those PvP issues that existed in the Division 1. So that's interesting. I'm curious to see what they do with that. I was also happy to hear that the Year 1 DLC will be free. I'm not sure if I heard that it was just for Year 1 or just in general. Maybe it's just for Year 1 and then for Year 2 you actually have to buy it. That's fine, whatever. But I like how this whole movement towards, and this is happening with everyone, with Microsoft, with EA, you know, there's been a lot of backlash because, of course, Battlefront 2 and these games that with their microtransactions and all of these things, and charging absurd prices for DLC. So I'm happy to see that the dynamic is going towards, you know, like just providing free DLC, or at least at the beginning, and then later, if you want, you can purchase anything new after Year 1. So we'll see how that's handled as well. I mean, Massive have been pretty cool about everything since the launch of the Division 1. They've been in constant contact with the community since the launch of the game. Every week they would release a show just talking about what changes have to be made in the game, what balances have to be made, upcoming changes or additions. They would take questions from the community. So I was kind of surprised with that. Not many companies do this. So it was nice to see. It was a nice, refreshing change. You can actually sign up for the beta right now. So I'll leave a link in the description below in case you're interested in signing up for that. Although there doesn't seem to be an official date for the beta yet, or at least that's what I understood. So I'll keep an eye on that for sure. As for the release date, they've confirmed it is March 15th, 2019. And they'll be releasing it, of course, for PC, for Xbox One, and for PS4. So that's cool. So we're about 9 months away. That's not too terrible. So I'm pretty excited. Let me know what you guys think. Are you excited about the game? Have you seen the trailers or the gameplay videos? What are your thoughts? What would you like to see added to the game? What do you think about the whole specializations thing they're going into? I think it's all very interesting. Obviously, we'll get more information as we get closer to release, but it would be very interesting to know what you guys think. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was informative, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.